She slid the blue bank bag across the counter and said it the way other mothers say goodnight. Run it to the night drop before 9. Baby, family doesn't take a salary. I was 14. The first time I carried their money. I carried it every Sunday night for 9 years, through rain, through ice, through 2 funerals, and I never kept a single dollar of it. Here is what I did not know while I was carrying it. Every one of those years, the federal government believed I was being paid $24,000 a year, because that is what my parents told them. $216,000 in wages, reported under my Social Security number, deposited into an account I did not control, filed on tax returns I never saw. I never touched 1 cent of it. Today, I read tax returns for a living. I am an enrolled agent. That is a person licensed by the federal government to stand between ordinary people and the tax agency. The way a lawyer stands between a person and a court. I find money that people try to hide. 14 months ago, for the first time in my life, I pulled my own file. And then, page by page, form by form, completely within the rules, I made every ghost paycheck real, to the dollar, with interest, hours and Huawei, with penalties, paid by the 2 people who invented them. My name is Marin Callis. I am 34 years old, and if you have ever done the work of an employee and been paid in the word family, comment unpaid below, because this story is for you, and I want to know you are out there. Stay with me. By the end of this, you are going to watch a blue bank bag slide across a counter one last time, except this time, I am the one sliding it. To show you how that bag ended up back on a counter in front of my father, I have to take you back exactly once. 1 jump. Everything in this story is measured from a single morning. The morning I walked out of my family's restaurant at 23 years old, with a folded piece of paper in my back pocket. I will call it that morning. Everything before it led to it. Everything after it led here. We start 9 years before that morning, when I was 14, in Joplin, Missouri. My parents owned a diner called the Copper Skillet, on Range Line Road, 41 seats, a counter with red stools, a pie case my grandmother had bought at auction in the 80s. My father ran the front. My mother ran the money. And I need you to understand something about my mother right away, because she is not the villain you are picturing. She never raised her voice in her life. She wore a cross, the size of a thumbnail. She called everyone baby, including the health inspector. When my mother did something to you, it arrived wrapped in concern, dated and filed. She was not a storm. She was a system. The summer I turned 14, my father hung an apron on the hook by the walk-in cooler, and my mother wrote my name on a strip of masking tape and pressed it above the hook with her thumb. Marin, in her looping Sunday school handwriting. I remember being proud of that tape. I want you to remember that tape, because it comes back, and when it comes back, it will not mean what it means right now. My older brother Grady was 16 that summer. Grady did not get a hook. Grady got a dirt bike. My mother explained the difference to me while she counted the register. Grady's got his studies. Baby, you've got a gift for this. I did have a gift for it. That was the trap. I could carry 4 plates on one arm by Labor Day. I could close the register to the penny. By October, my father handed me the Sunday deposit, the blue vinyl bank bag with the zipper and the little brass lock, and inside it, a whole weekend's cash. He handed a 14-year-old the most important object in the building, and he never once handed her a paycheck. The teller at the night drop window knew my face before my own school. Principal did. The first time I asked about money, I was 15. It was a Friday in August, and I had worked a double because the dishwasher quit. I asked my father at the counter, quietly, if I could get paid like the other girls. He did not get angry. My father never got angry, and I want you to sit with how much worse that is. He wiped his hands on his apron, and he smiled at me like I had said something sweet and a little bit sad. And he said the sentence that ran my life for the next 8 years. Family doesn't take a salary, Marin, and then the part people never quote. Everything here is going to be yours, and Grady's someday. You are not working for me, baby. You are working for you. If you have ever heard a version of that sentence, you know it does not feel like theft when you are 15. It feels like belonging. That is the whole trick. It is theft that feels like belonging. I put my question down. I picked up the coffee pot. I put a lot of things down in that building, and I am going to show you 3 of them, because those 3 things are the whole case. Stay with me. The first one looks like nothing at all. 6 years before that morning, when I was 17, my school counselor pulled me out of 4th period. There was a program, she said, 2 evenings a week, a bookkeeping and accounting course at the Joplin Public Library. Free, taught by a retired man who had done taxes for 40 years. She had signed me up because I had the best math grades in my year and the worst attendance. I brought the flyer home and set it on the counter next to the tape dispenser. My mother read it while she trimmed pie crust. Tuesdays and Thursdays, baby, those are your closing shifts. That was the whole conversation. She was not asking. But here is what I did, and I have never told my parents this to this day. I took the course anyway, at 6 in the morning, in the version the man taught at the senior center for retirees, before school, before prep shift. For 2 years, I was the only person under 70 in that room, learning what a ledger is, what a liability is, what it means when numbers do not reconcile. I learned to read numbers, the way some kids learn to read music. Remember that. Disbin wonderful. The habit I built at that folding table, surrounded by retirees drinking decaf, is the exact habit that ends this story. My parents paid for it, in a way. They just did not know the invoice would come 17 years later. That same year, Grady turned 19 and got a truck. Not a used truck, a new one, red with a bow on it in the church parking lot, because the restaurant had had, in my father's words, a good year. I had worked 6 days a week of that good year. I stood in that parking lot in my work shoes, and I clapped, and I noticed a feeling in my chest that I did not have a word for yet. I have a word for it now. The word is evidence. I did not know it then, but the money for that truck had a paper trail, and my name was already on it, because 5 years before that morning, the winter I turned 18, 2 things happened in the same week, and I need you to hear them slowly, one at a time, because these are the load-bearing beams of everything that comes later. First, my father took me to open my first bank account. He made it an occasion. He bought me a hot chocolate. We sat across a desk from a man at the branch on 7th Street, and my father did the talking, and I signed where the little sticky arrows pointed, and I walked out with a savings account in my name. What I did not read, at 18, with hot chocolate in my hand, was that it was a joint account. My mother's name was on it. Beside mine, she had the card. She had the statements mailed to the restaurant. For years I called it my account, the way a child calls it my house. I never saw one statement. I want to be precise here, because precision is what saved me. I am not saying the account was hidden from me. I am saying it was handed to me with the lid already on. There is a difference, and the difference is what a lawyer would call intent. Second, that same week, during a lunch rush. My mother came out of the office with a folder and a pen. Health inspector renewal, baby. They need every family member on file. I had a rag over one shoulder and a table of 8 regulars waiting on pie. She held the folder. She turned the pages for me, and I signed where the tape flags pointed. 4 times, standing up, at the wait station, in under 90 seconds. I remember one page had the logo of Table Rock State Bank at the top, and I remember a half second of wondering why the health department's form had a bank's name on it. And then Table 6 needed coffee, and I put the wondering down. You already know. I should not have put it down, but I want to say something to every person watching who has ever signed where a parent pointed. The reason you did not read it is not that you were stupid. The reason you did not read it is that reading it would have meant believing your own family required reading. Nobody hands a lie detector to the people who raised them. They count on that. Mine counted on it in writing. One of those 4 pages, I would learn much later, was called a personal guarantee. In plain words, a personal guarantee means if this business ever cannot pay this loan, this one human being promises to pay it out of her own pocket. Forever, no matter what. The loan was for $48,000 for 2 new fryers, a walk-in freezer, and a point-of-sale system. The business took the equipment. 18-year-old me, standing at a wait station with a coffee pot, took the risk, and nobody in my family ever mentioned it again. 2 years before that morning, when I was 21, I asked for money one more time. I want to tell you about it because it is the last time I asked anyone in that family for anything, and because of what my grandmother did 3 days later. It was the week after Christmas. We had just closed out the biggest week in the restaurant's history. I know it was the biggest because I counted it. I zipped it into the blue bag myself. 3 Sundays in a row, and the bag was so full, the zipper fought me. I waited until the dining room was empty, and I asked my father, calmly, with numbers, the way I had rehearsed in the car, not for back pay, just for a wage, going forward, anything, on paper. My father did not say no. That would have been honest. And honesty was never the house style. Instead, he got concerned. He sat me down in a booth like I was a customer with a complaint, and he folded his hands, and he explained, gently, reasonably, that a wage would actually hurt me. Taxes, baby, paperwork. The second you are on the books, the government's in your pocket. He said the family took care of me in ways a paycheck never could. Room. And, wow, and board. Tampsu smell. The car I drove, which I had bought myself. But I did not correct him. Because you learn not to hand a calm man your facts. He patted my hand twice. He said, the sentence. Family doesn't take a salary. And my mother, who had been listening from the pie case the whole time, came over with a slice of leftover birthday cake from a party we had catered. And she boxed it up for me. And she wrote my name on the box on a strip of masking tape. Massachusetts Wren, in that looping hand, and she pressed it down with her thumb. And she smiled at me with real warmth, because she did love me, in the way you love a reliable appliance. And she said, we'd be lost without you, baby. I took my name-tagged box of somebody else's cake, and I drove home, and I did not cry. I want that on the record early. In this whole story, I cry exactly once, and it is not tonight, and it is not where you think. 3 days later, my grandmother, my father's mother, who everyone calls Nana, who was 81 that winter and sharp as a tax deadline, watched me bus 4 tables during the New Year's rush, while Grady, 23 years old, and officially the restaurant's manager on paper, watched a bowl game on his phone at the counter. Nana did not say anything. In the restaurant, Nana never wasted words, indoors. But when I carried her leftovers to her car, She held my wrist in the parking lot with her little cold hand. And she looked up at me. And she said, "I told your father he is spending you like you are money, June Bug." You remember somebody said it out loud. Then she got in her Buick and drove home. One sentence. In a parking lot, in the cold. It did not change anything that year. But there are sentences that work, like a coat. Someone hangs on you. You do not notice the weight until the weather turns. That was the last thing anyone in my family said to me that was true. For a very long time. Now, that morning, the 0 point. Everything in this story has been counting down to it. So I am going to give it to you the way I gave it to the bank's fraud unit. 11 years later, minute by minute. Because it turns out I never forgot a single detail. And there is a reason victims of quiet families have perfect memories. Nobody else was keeping the record. Somebody had to. It was a Monday in April. I was 23. At 9 a.m., I walked into the Table Rock State Bank branch on 7th Street. The same branch with the night drop I had fed every Sunday for 9 years. To apply for a car loan, $9,000 for a used Corolla, because my Accord had 210,000 miles on it, and a transmission that prayed at stoplights. I had a folder with my savings passbook, and 3 years of tips I had deposited myself, quarter by quarter, into a second account. My parents did not know existed because, by 23, some animal part of me had already started hiding food for winter. I sat across the desk from a loan officer, and I watched her face do a thing at her screen. A small thing. A tightening. If you have ever watched a professional discover something about you that you do not know yet, you know that tightening. She turned the screen toward me. At 9:11 a.m., there was a debt on my credit report. Not a late payment. A charge-off. A charge-off, in plain words, is when a bank decides a loan is never coming back, gives up collecting, and stamps the failure onto your record like a burn mark, where it stays for years. This one was for $48,000, plus interest, defaulted 26 months earlier. Original lender, Table Rock, State Bank. Borrower, Copper Skillet, LLC. Guarantor, in small letters, one name, Marin Callis. The Friars. The freezer. The 4 signatures at the wait station. 5 years earlier, between the coffee pot and table 6. The restaurant had stopped paying that loan more than 2 years ago. The bank had come after the guarantee, sent the letters to the restaurant's address, where my mother collected the mail, and the whole thing had died quietly on my credit report while I was serving pie 40 feet from the office, where the letters were filed. The loan officer printed the report for me. She was kind. She said, "You should talk to your family." She had no idea she was handing me the first page of a federal case. I did not go home. I drove straight to the restaurant and I walked in through the back at 10:40 a.m. through the kitchen, past my apron, past the masking tape with my name that had been rewritten maybe 6 times in 9 years, as the strips dried out and curled, always in her handwriting, never in mine. My mother was at the office door. My father was at the flat top. I put the credit report on the counter, next to the tape dispenser, and I smoothed it flat with my thumb, the way she pressed tape, and I said, $48,000, my name, 26 months, in default. Tell me you didn't know. And here is the moment I need you to see, because it is the moment the story turns. And it is quieter than you want it to be. My father looked at the paper, and he did not look surprised. He looked inconvenienced. He wiped his hands, and he sighed, the sigh of a man whose employee has found a scheduling error. And he said, "We were going to take care of it, Marin. It is family money. Family doesn't take a salary, and family doesn't keep score. Family doesn't keep score." I stood in that kitchen, 23 years old, and something in me went very still and very cold. And I have learned since that this is what my body does instead of shattering. I took off my apron. I folded it on the counter. I peeled the masking tape with my name off the hook, and I stuck it to the credit report, right across the top, so that my name in her handwriting sat above my name in the bank's typeface. And I slid both toward my father. I set my keys beside it. The empty blue bank bag was sitting on the shelf above the office door, where it had lived my whole childhood, and I looked at it for 1 second, and I left it there. Then I walked out through the dining room, in front of 4 regulars and a pot of coffee I had put on myself an hour earlier, and my mother followed me into the parking lot. And this is the only thing she said. Not sorry. Not stay. She said, "Don't you do this to your father, baby. His heart." I got in my dying Accord, and I drove to the grocery store parking lot on 32nd Street, and I sat there for 1 hour with my hands on the wheel. I did not cry. I am telling you, that is not where the crying happens. What I did instead, and I can only explain this now, was I opened the glove box, took out the little notepad I kept for gas mileage, and I wrote down everything. Times. My words. Words. The loan. Number. The sigh. It is the first page of what would one day be a binder, with 140 pages in it. If you have ever been quietly robbed by people who tuck you in at night, hear me on this one thing. Write it down. Not for revenge, for gravity. Paper is the only place the truth can stand, still long enough to be believed. If any part of you is watching this in a parking lot of your own right now, comment unpaid below, and then stay with me, because the next part of this story is the part they never expect from people like us. The part where we get quiet, get licensed, and get everything back with interest. 2 weeks after that morning, I answered a paper sign taped inside a strip mall window in Springfield, an hour up the road, where I was sleeping on a former coworker's couch. The sign said, "Tax preparation and bookkeeping. Seasonal help wanted. Ask for Ruth." Ruth Okafor was 61 years old, ran a 2-desk tax office between a nail salon and a vacuum repair shop, and had exactly 0 patience for artisans. She asked me what I could do. I said I had run the books, the register, the ordering, the payroll count, and the bank deposits for a 41-seat restaurant for 9 years. She asked why none of that was on paper, and I said the sentence that makes me want to reach back through time and hold that girl's hand. I said, "I've never been on a payroll in my life. Remember that sentence. In 14 months, you are going to hear how wrong it was." Ruth looked at me for a long moment, over her glasses. Then she pushed a shoebox of receipts across the desk, a shoebox from a man who ran 3 food trucks and kept his records like a raccoon keeps a nest. And she said, "Sort it. Talk to me in an hour." I sorted it in 40 minutes, reconciled to the dollar, flagged 2 deposits that did not match any invoice, and when she checked the flags and saw they were real, she took her glasses all the way off. She hired me at $14 an hour, on the books, with a pay stub. And when the anger about my family finally came out of me one February night over cold dumplings and a stack of amended returns, when I told her the whole thing, the tape, the bag, the guarantee, Ruth did not gasp, did not call a lawyer, did not tell me what to do. She listened all the way to the end with her hands folded. And then she said the one sentence I will remember for the rest of my life. "A number will wait for you. Honey, it sits there being true until the day you are ready to read it." I did not fully understand it that night. I understand it completely now. Every dollar they took had already written its own confession, in triplicate, in systems my parents did not control, and it had been sitting there for years, patient as scripture, waiting for me to become the kind of person who knew where to look. So, I became her. Let me give you 8 years in 2 minutes, because you already know I survive, and survival is errands. What matters is the transformation. First tax season, I did 400 returns and slept under my desk twice. Second year, Ruth put my name on the door schedule in dry erase marker, and I caught myself staring at it because it was the first time my name had been written anywhere by someone who paid me. Third year, I started studying for the enrolled agent exam, which is a 3-part federal test, and the license means the government itself certifies you to represent taxpayers against it, to stand in the room where audits happen and argue the numbers. I passed all 3 parts in 11 months. The day my license came, Ruth closed the office an hour early, bought a lemon sheet cake, and gave me a small engraved nameplate for my desk. M. O. Callous. Enrolled agent. Brass. Screwed down. Not tape. I met a paramedic named Caleb at that same strip mall of all places, when his ambulance posted outside the nail salon, and I married him under an oak tree with 11 guests. And Ruth sat in the front row on the side where a mother goes. Our daughter Pearl was born 4 years ago, in June, with Caleb's calm and my stare. And through all of it, all 8 years, I did not call my parents, and my parents did not call me, and twice a month like a tide, Nana called from her landline in Joplin, never once asking me to come home, only ever asking what I was building. My family did not shrink when I left it. It got specific, and one small thing from those years. Because it matters, later, buying office supplies one spring. I turned a corner in the aisle, and there was a whole row of them. Blue vinyl bank deposit bags, zippers, little brass locks, hanging on hooks, $19 each. I stood in front of that row for a while. I did not buy one. Not that year. But I noticed my hand had reached out and touched one. The way you touch a scar, to check if it is still yours. Now come with me to 14 months ago, because this is where the story you came here for actually begins. Everything so far was the fuse. This is the match. 14 months ago, Caleb and I applied for a mortgage. Our first house, a brick ranch with a crooked maple, 12 minutes from the office. The lender wanted the usual stack, and part of the usual stack is your tax transcripts, which are the government's own record of your history, pulled straight from the source. Now, I request transcripts for clients every week of my life. It is the most routine thing I do, but I had never, once, pulled my own full history. Why would I? I knew my history. I had lived it. So on a Tuesday night, after Pearl was asleep at my kitchen table with a cup of decaf going cold, I requested every wage and income transcript on file for me. A wage and income transcript, in plain words, is the government's list of every dollar any employer, bank, or business ever claimed they paid you. Not what you say you earned, but what the world says. It paid you. They came through as a stack of pages, one per year, oldest first, and I want to walk you through this the way it actually happened, page by page, because I have watched 100 clients discover things in documents, and I had never once been the client. The first page was the year I turned 18, and there, under employer, in clean federal typeface, it said Copper Skillet, LLC, wages paid, $24,000. I looked at that line for a long time. My first thought, and I am being honest with you because this is how deep it goes, my first thought was that it must be a correction of some kind, some late repair. My parents had filed to quietly make things right. That is what a trained fraud examiner thought. At her own kitchen table, at 11 at night. The training never beats the childhood. On the first move, I turned the page. The next year, Copper Skillet, LLC, $24,000. I turned the page. 24,000. I turned the page. 24,000. 6 years. Then, the year I was 23. The year of that morning. The year I folded my apron and walked out in April. $24,000. A full year of wages. Reported for a woman who left in the spring. And then, and this is the part where my hands went still on the table, I turned the page again. The year after I left. $24,000. And again. And again. 3 more full years of wages. Reported and filed. For an employee who was an hour away, sorting strangers' receipts in a strip mall, telling her new boss she had never been on a payroll in her life. They did not just fail to pay me while I worked there. They kept paying the ghost of me for 3 years after I was gone. 9 years of filings. $24,000 a year. For 9 years. $216,000. Reported to the federal government as paid to Marin Callis. Let me put that number where you can feel it. $216,000 is the entire brick house we were trying to buy. Paid off, with the crooked maple thrown in. It is every year of Pearl's college, with money left for a wedding. It is 9 years of a grown woman's whole working life. Filed. Stamp. Tam. Stolen twice. Once from my hands, and once in my name. Stay with me now, because your next question was my next question. And the answer is worse. If the government believed I earned all that, where were my tax returns? Ghost wages should have set off alarms. Letters, penalties, addressed to me, unless someone was answering the letters. So I pulled the next set of records. My account transcripts. The history of every return ever filed under my number. And there they were. 9 years of tax returns, filed in my name, on time. Every spring, signed by a paid preparer, whose name I recognized because he had eaten free at our counter. Every Friday of my childhood. My parents' accountant. I never saw one of those returns. I never signed one. Each one listed a refund. And each refund was deposited. The records showed the account number plain as day. Into the joint savings account on 7th Street. The account with the lid already on. Hot chocolate. Little, sticky arrows. My mother's name beside mine. That night I did cry 0 times, and I need you to understand the order of operations here. Because people ask me how I stayed so calm. And the answer is that I did not feel calm. I felt like a house feels when the foundation shifts 1 inch. Nothing falls. Everything is different. I sat at my kitchen table until 2 in the morning, and I did what Ruth taught me and what the retirees at that library folding table taught me before her. I read the numbers. All of them. Because I was still a joint owner of that account on 7th Street, which meant that legally, cleanly, without asking anyone's permission, I was entitled to every statement it had ever generated. I requested 11 years of them. The next morning, paper copies. Certified. When the box arrived 12 days later, I took a personal day, the first one of my life, and I laid the statements out on my dining room floor in rows by year, and the whole machine came into focus in one afternoon. Here is how it worked. In plain words, because you do not need a license to understand a lie. Every month, the restaurant moved $2,000 into the joint account and called it my wages. That made it a business expense, which lowered the taxes the restaurant paid. Then, within a few days, most of that money moved right back out to the restaurant's own account, to my father's account, and year after year in polite recurring pieces, to 2 other places. A university billing office, tuition, room, and board. For the years, my brother Grady was enrolled, and a mortgage company, month after month after month, for a property that was not the restaurant and was not my parents' house. It took me 1 search to find it. A lake house near Table Rock Lake, bought the year I turned 19, the year after the guarantee. I had been the down payment. I had been the tuition. I had been the good year that bought the truck with the bow on it. My paychecks existed. They had always existed. They just never came looking for me, because they already had somewhere better to be. And one page further in that same box, in the oldest statements, I found the last thing, the thing that turned my stomach in a way the money never quite did. The signature card from the day the account was opened, the bank's own copy, and stapled behind it, the bank's copy of the personal guarantee from the equipment loan, $48,000. Guarantor, Marin Callis. And there was my signature, except it was not my signature. I had signed 4 pages at a wait station once. That was true, and I will never know exactly what those 4 were. But this page, this particular page, was dated a Tuesday in February when my whole junior class was on the Springfield Civics trip. 100 kids, a courthouse tour, a date I could prove with a yearbook, and the name on the line was written carefully, evenly, sitting up straight, in looping letters I had seen 10,000 times, on birthday cards, on cake boxes, on a strip of masking tape above an apron hook, rewritten 6 times in 9 years. My mother had been signing my name her whole life. She had just always used tape before. If you have ever waited 11 years for a single page of proof, if you know what it is to be certain and unbelieved at the same time, subscribe, not for me. But so the next person like us finds this story on the worst night of their life. Now watch what a quiet person does when the paperwork is finally on her side. Here is what I did not do. I did not call my parents. I did not post anything. I did not drive to Joplin in the dark. People think revenge is a fire. Fire is for people with nothing to file. What I did instead took 4 months, and every single step of it was boring, lawful, and available to any citizen of this country. And that is exactly why it worked. First, I filed the identity theft affidavit with the tax agency. That is a sworn statement, one form that says returns were filed in my name without my knowledge. Here is my proof, and I signed it under penalty of perjury, which my mother should appreciate, because it was the first time in 9 years that a signature on a tax document in my name was real. Second, I filed a fraud referral. There is a form, and I want every overworked family employee watching to hear this. There is a plain paper form that any person can send the tax agency to report tax fraud. No lawyer, no fee. I attached a binder, 140 pages, the transcripts, the 11 years of statements, the tuition transfers, the lake house mortgage payments, the ghost returns, the February date, a photocopy of a yearbook page, and on top, page 1, the notepad sheet from a grocery store parking lot, 11 years old, written by a 23-year-old with her hands still steady. Third, I sent the bank's fraud department a forgery affidavit on the guarantee, with the signature card, the civics trip, and 30 photographs of my mother's handwriting, birthday cards and recipe cards, and 1 strip of masking tape that Nana had kept curled in her sewing tin for years because it had my name on it. And fourth, I did the thing my license required. Nothing clever. I represented myself, disclosed everything, followed every procedure I make my clients follow. And then I waited, because Ruth was right. A number will wait for you. It was somebody else's turn to be waited on. The bank answered first. 9 weeks. A letter, 3 paragraphs, that I have since framed, and I will translate it from bank into human. Paragraph 1. We investigated. Paragraph 2. We agree the signature is not yours. The guarantee is void as to you, and the charge-off is being deleted from your record, as if it never existed. Paragraph 3. The debt has been reassigned to the parties determined to have executed it, and our recovery department will pursue them directly. $48,000 plus 11 years of interest, lifted off my name and set down gently, formally, in writing, onto theirs. The government answered, second. And this is where I cry. I told you it was coming, and I told you it was not where you would think. It was a Thursday in the fall, and the letter looked like every other letter, and I opened it standing in the office parking lot, with my car door still open. And the first sentence said that my identity theft claim had been reviewed, and the determination was that I was a victim. That word. After everything, after the friars and the ghost and the lake house, it was one typed word from a federal agency that finally got through, because it was the first time in 33 years that anyone with authority had looked at my whole file and said plainly, this was done to you. It was not your imagination, and it was not your fault. I sat down sideways in the driver's seat, with my feet still on the asphalt, and I cried for about 4 minutes, alone, with the radio off. Then I wiped my face with the heel of my hand, went inside, and did a stranger's taxes, because that is who I am now. And honestly, it is who I always was. Somebody just finally paid me for it. The audit of the copper skillet opened that winter. I did not trigger it with a phone call or a favor. I triggered it with a binder through the front door, like anyone could. And in February, my phone rang with a number I had not seen in 11 years. And my mother's voice, warm as ever, said, "Baby, there has been some mix-up with the taxes, some misunderstanding about your old wages, and we need you to sign a little statement saying, you were paid in cash back then. It would clear this whole thing right up. I want you to sit with that sentence the way I did." 11 years of silence. And the first call was not an apology. It was a request for one more signature. I said I would meet them one time, Tuesday, 10 a.m., at my office, and I hung up before she could say baby again. They arrived at 10:04. My father had gotten old in the way that heavy secrets age a man, from the shoulders down. My mother wore the little cross and brought a tin of snickerdoodles, which Ruth accepted at the front desk, with a face I can only describe as Old Testament. We sat in the conference room. I had one object with me. A blue vinyl bank bag, zipper, little brass lock. $19, because that spring I had finally gone back to that aisle and bought one. I set it on the table and I said, 3 things, and then a question. I am going to say them once. 1. The equipment loan. The bank's fraud unit has ruled the guarantee void. The forgery finding is final. The $48,000, with interest, is yours now, personally. You'll want to open your mail this time. My father's mouth opened. I held up one finger and kept going, because a reckoning is not a conversation. 2. The audit is not a mix-up. It exists because months ago, I reported 9 years of fake wages, fake returns, and fake refunds, filed under my Social Security number, with $216,000 of documentation. I did not do it in anger. I did it on a form. Anyone can. 3. I will tell the truth about all of it exactly once, under oath, if I am asked, and I will not say one word that is not already in the documents, which means what happens to you now was written by you, in your handwriting, years ago. I am just the person who read it out loud. Then my mother leaned forward, and she said, and I will hear this until I die. Maren, baby, we're family. And there it was, arriving right on schedule. The sentence I had been waiting 11 years to hand back. I unzipped the bag, took out the folder of copies, every page tabbed, their audit notice on top, and I slid it across the table, the way a bag was once slid to me. And I said, Family doesn't take a salary. You taught me that. Employees do. And the government has had me on your payroll for 9 years, in your own filings. So pick one. Either I was family, and you forged me, or I was staff, and you robbed me. You don't have to answer me. You have to answer them. I stood up. I said, the last thing I have ever said to my father, face to face. Deliveries were always my job. That is the last one. And I walked out of my own conference room and went back to my desk. And through the glass, I watched Ruth, 69 years old, hold the front door open for them with perfect courtesy, like a woman releasing 2 fish that were under the legal limit. They did not go quietly. And I promised you this part. So here it is. Flat, the way I keep it. In the following month, my mother left 11 voicemails. They came in a strict order I now know by heart, because it is the order the manuals predict. First concern, baby, your father's heart. Then rewriting. We always meant that money for you. It was your inheritance growing. Then, anger, one single crack in the warmth. You have always been cold. Marin, even as a child, which I saved, because it is the only honest one. Then bargaining, sign the statement, and we will give you the lake house. They offered me the lake house, the one my ghost paychecks bought. I answered, none of them. My father came to the office once, in person, and stood at the front desk and demanded to see his daughter, and Ruth, without standing up, said, there is no daughter here. There is an enrolled agent, and she is with a client. He never came back. At Christmas, a card arrived in looping handwriting. It said, we forgive you. Come home. I read it twice to make sure it really said forgive. It really did. And I put it in the binder, page 141, because even their mercy was evidence, and the consequences came in on schedule, like tides, in envelopes. The examination closed with a finding of fraud between the taxes they had dodged and the penalties for the dodging. The bill came to $170,000. And fraud penalties are the kind that do not wash out, do not settle for pennies, and do not care whose heart is tired. The accountant who signed 9 ghost returns with my name on them lost his standing to practice before the tax agency, which in plain words means the man who ate free at our counter every Friday is no longer allowed to prepare anyone's taxes for money. Ever. The lake house sold in the fall. I found the listing myself. Sunday, drenched. The listing said, motivated sellers. And in January, a client of ours who lives in Joplin mentioned, not knowing a thing, that the old copper skillet on Rangeline had changed hands, and that the new family had gutted it, and that the tacos were outstanding. 41 seats. Somebody else's name. Over the door. I did not celebrate any of it. I logged it. There is a version of me that wanted a bonfire. The real me got a 3-paragraph letter, a deleted charge-off, a federal determination, and a taco recommendation. And I am here to tell you the real version is better, because a bonfire warms you once. Paper is forever. Do I have my family back? Number CN Waity sort have an NON. Let me be honest with you at the end. The way nobody was honest with me at the beginning. My parents believe, to this day, in whatever room they rent now, that I destroyed this family. Over money. They are wrong, twice. In one sentence. It was never money. It was the erasing. And you cannot destroy what was never built. What I have instead is smaller. And it is real. And it is mine. I have Caleb. I have Pearl. I have Ruth, who retired last spring and sold me the practice on terms. So gentle they were basically a blessing. And who still comes in Thursdays to drink our coffee and judge our filing. I have Grady. A little. Which surprised me most of all. He sent one text the week the lake house sold. He said, I did not know about the loan or the returns, but I never asked where the truck came from or the tuition, and I should have. I am sorry, Mayor. I let that sit for 2 days, and then I answered with the only thing that was true. You were a kid too. They spent you different, but they spent you. He drives up now, some Sundays. He is learning to ask question. It is slow. It is real. And I have Nana, 89, who I drive down to see every month, who kept a strip of masking tape with my name on it curled in a sewing tin for years. Because, she said, somebody in that family ought to keep a record of you, Junebug. And if it has to be the old woman, fine. Last September, Pearl started school. First day. Backpack. The size of her whole torso, and I stood at my kitchen counter making her lunch. And I wrote her name on a strip of masking tape. Pearl, in my handwriting, in my kitchen. And I pressed it onto her lunchbox with my thumb. And I stood there for a second with the roll of tape in my hand. And I finally understood the whole thing. All of it, the hook, the 9 rewritten strips, and I said it out loud to my empty kitchen. So it would be real. Tape is for lunch boxes. Tape is for leftovers. Tape is for things that are temporary, things that get used up, things that belong to somebody else. It was never supposed to be how a person's name gets written. My name is on a window now, gold letters, baked on, Kalis Tax Services. My name is on a federal license. My name is on a mortgage, on a brick ranch, under a crooked maple next to Caleb's. And when the government writes to me, which it does all the time now, professionally, respectfully, the envelope says my whole name. And I put those letters in a drawer that I open whenever I want, because the lid is off, and it is staying off. My father used to say, family doesn't take a salary. For 9 years, I thought that sentence was the lock on my life. It took me 34 years. 1 library folding table, 1 strip mall, 1 blue bag, and 140 pages to hear what was wrong with it. He was almost right. Family doesn't take. That is the whole sentence. That is the whole difference. And if you have somebody in your life who needed to hear that tonight, or if you were the one who needed it, tell me one thing in the comments. Just 1 word, the word you would have written on your own strip of tape. I read every one. Because somebody in this family ought to keep a record of you. And if it has to be a stranger on the internet, fine. Nana taught me that.